Hi, my name's Andrew Patrick. I'm the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence's Director of Political Communications. I'm here tonight with Josh Horwitz, our Executive Director. Josh, we've seen 3 days of Amy Coney Barrett's hearings as a Supreme Court nominee. We know there's some concerns about her dissent in one case, the Cantor decision, but also just in general, from your view, what are the broader implications of this possible 6-3 conservative court for gun violence prevention and beyond?
Well, look, I found the last 3 days just deeply disturbing. The inability to answer the most basic questions about what should be very settled doctrine. The idea that she won't comment on the Griswold case. These are things that are the foundations of things like reproductive rights. The idea that she won't comment on transfer of power. I mean, this would just be deeply disturbing to any American who, wherever you are. I mean, to have a justice who refuses to answer the most basic questions about our democracy is just deeply, deeply troubling. But Andrew, to go to the narrow question about the Cantor case and gun rights, I find again that disturbing in some very significant ways. Mostly because she has an extremely broad view of an individual right to keep and bear arms. And for me, that's something that's completely ahistorical. To tether that right completely outside of any militia, which militia clause is written in the Second Amendment, but for her is completely untethered to that. It's a broad individual right for anybody at all times. And she bases this on a review of her view of looking at what was going on in 1787. And I think it's deeply problematic. For instance, we didn't have assault weapons in 1787. We didn't even have revolvers back then, right? The types of issues that we have today with high suicide rates and disproportionate impact in communities of color with gun violence. These are issues that you need a modern approach. You need to be sympathetic to rights of our citizens now. And the idea that you're gonna stop our development in 1787 and look at what she follows Scalia's view that you have to interpret the Constitution as meant in 1787. We have a very, very different country right now. And I think you need to try to understand what the framers were doing in the Constitution, that it was a document that should withstand the ages. And that means looking at the core principles and applying them, but not saying if something wasn't there in 1787, then we can't, then there's nothing we can do about it. And I am very concerned for this broad individual right that she founds, somehow rooted in her mysterious view of what history says.
Yeah, Josh, I've been watching this whole thing. It just feels like a complete sham. It feels like everyone's minds are made up. She's giving evasive answers about things that should be basic principle, a peaceful transfer of power for a president, recusing yourself when it comes into like election law that you're being appointed to, clearly politically. Just the refusal. We wrote about this last night, but voter intimidation and not even acknowledging it as a possible as illegal even. So there's just been a real kabuki theater going on here in this whole hearing that's concerning to me and her nomination going forward, which looks like it's going to possibly sail through, but it's incredibly dangerous.
It is incredibly dangerous, and here's why. The norms of democracy that we've seen for the last couple hundred years, but especially in the post World War II democratic order, and the idea that we should have an expanding democracy, that we should have institutions that we have checks and balances, that our adherence, our faith in democracy, our faith in our fellow citizens, and the idea that legislators ultimately will do the right thing, and that we respect the system more than we respect our ideology. That has gone out the window. And that should be something that I find horrific and scary. And, when you think about what binds our democracy together, it's the idea that I may not agree with you today, but I agree with you as a citizen, that your vote matters, that your voice matters. and that I respect the idea that there were some days that you will win and some days that I will win, but we're going to come back and both be part of the democratic system. That is going out the window. That is changing the norms of our democracy, ramming a nomination through in the last few days of a presidency, the absolute lack of respect on the Republican side of the Judiciary Committee for their Democratic colleagues. Their idea that those voices don't matter, their idea that fellow citizens' voices don't matter. We're at a crisis. And if you watch those hearings and you think everything's okay, then you don't really understand what America's all about.
I think you're exactly right, Josh. Like, well said. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes tonight. It's just been kind of surreal to watch what we're going through right now, but that's the world we live in. So
it's a world we live in, and we need to fight to change it back to something that has democratic norms and we respect our process.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, Josh.
Thanks for having me.